I believe there are many different ways that Christians can respond to systemic issues. Is first we have to acknowledge that these things actually exist. These are not boogeymen. This is not some sort of subversive act of minorities or people of color to try to create some inverse of power. Right? These are real things. We think about how redlining or how the Housing Act has impacted our cities and created ghettos. We think about how education systems have benefited certain people groups. We talk about how there are still companies that are thriving to this day off the backs of slavery. They were built because of slavery and they still thrive today. So there are systems, and obviously the criminal justice system. There are books and movies about this. So these are not just ghosts we're talking about. These are real things. And I think the way you address it is one, we have to acknowledge that we as individuals, if you're a Christian, you believe that you're broken, right? And you believe that Jesus redeems that brokenness in God, but we still create within the brokenness that we are. Like, we're still a mess, even though we're redeemed in our posture, in our interaction, and in our practice. We still create an error, right? We see in Genesis 1:26 to 28 that God created man and woman in his likeness and image, and he gives us a task to cultivate and to multiply the earth, to subdue it. And this is the task for us to work, right? And this is the mandate in which we create systems. And if we see in Genesis 2 and 3 that because of sin and because of the fall, that our relationship with God is broken on a personal level, and then we also see that our connection and relationship with one another is broken. So that also means that in our creating and our cultivating, that there's brokenness in that as well. And so how do we see that Jesus' redemption restores that? And so there's a great story someone was telling me about the road to the Jericho road and the Great Samaritan. And there's oftentimes when we read that story, we'll find that the end of the message is we just need more Good Samaritans who can reach across cultural lines and ethnic lines and love one another. But at the end of the day, he says, we got to ask the question, why is so much bad happening on the Jericho road? And that's a systemic problem. Somebody needs to do something about this road that leads from one city to the next that so much crime is happening on. And oftentimes what we want to do in Christianity is just displace the problem, because if it's not my problem, if these individuals aren't being broken into, or if these individuals aren't being shot in front of my house, if these school systems aren't broken in my neighborhood, if police aren't unjustly pulling people over on my street, then it's not my problem. And then when it does become a problem, usually what we do is we just, in our capitalist society, we don't necessarily solve the problem, we just displace it. We move the problem away from us. Or we escape the problem because we have the means to, but we have to recognize that other people don't have the means to. And so for us who have means, who have ability, who have power and privilege, how do we begin to address these issues that we find can be problematic and may not be adversely affecting us, but are affecting our brothers and sisters, not only our brothers and sisters in Christ, but just humans in general. And so I think it's our job to be caregivers of the earth and cultivators and creating systems that are supplying the flourishing and the thriving of all communities and all nations, very similar to Jeremiah 29. Jeremiah 29, where we see that God gives the mandate for folks who are in exile to seek the flourishing of the city, for in your benefit is its benefit as well. And so today what we're seeing are Christians who care for the city, who care for our communities, who care for our neighborhoods, not just because we find the blessed in it, but because we feel like it's going to bless other people as well. First, they must have to acknowledge that they have privilege. I think there's so much discussion and debate on what is privilege, and if that's a real thing, and it's absolutely a real thing. Everybody has a form of privilege, and so how do you leverage those things for the benefit of other people? And so practically, Christians, I think one is we can begin to stop perpetuating ideologies that only benefit, like political, ideologies, social ideologies, that only benefit those people who are in the top percent of a social economic status, right? I think we can also begin to learn and posture ourselves under people who aren't privileged? How do you, because oftentimes we talk about being reconciled to people, but we want to reconcile folks without dealing with the truth of our history and why people are privileged. We got to deal with the fact that America is, and this is one thing, we got to like remove this this fascination with America as this pristine, clean nation. I mean, everybody will admit, yeah, slavery was wrong, and the Indian Removal Act, and Trail of Tears was wrong, and Japanese and internment camps are wrong. But we don't realize that we benefit today. Like many people benefit from those actions still to this day, and so you have to wrestle with that tension. Is like, how did my family benefit from the subjugation of other people today, right? And in that, begin to change the theologies and the philosophies and the posture that you have and how you serve people, right? You have a lot to learn from your brothers and sisters who are different from you. And so understand that the Christian values and the Christianity you have is not just a Christianity that only benefits that should only benefit white evangelicals, but it's a relationship and a religion and a faith that should have benefits for all people. So if there's only a theology that can thrive in the palace, right, then that's a problem. It should be able to thrive in with the peasants as well. And I'm not trying to say that people of color are peasants, but it's just an analogy. So get over it. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. There's a lot of stuff that I think I don't know how many examples. I think I just shared 3, but there's about 30 more that I can share.